Clayton Jacobson, how you going, mate?
I'm very well, very well. Loving in just even just the 2 seconds that we've been on this thing. I'm already madly in love with you. Any man that wears a hat and glasses as well as you do, and a beard and moustache, is a good friend of mine.
Well, I've been following your career, so I thought I'd prepare for the interview. Well, firstly, thanks for kicking back, mate. I'm a huge fan of yours, and it's safe to say all of us here at Good Movie Monday are. And I mean, you're no stranger to the folks at Monster Pictures who are involved with this podcast. So Ben Helwig, who co-hosts the show with me, was instrumental in getting Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em onto DVD.
Mate, I was so rapt to hear that. Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em is a fabulous cult movie that my good mate Ray Bosley, we grew up together. We were literally 5 doors away from each other, and we found each other as filmmakers. We've known each other since we were 2, basically. We went through film school together, and he made this wonderful film. And I was just so rapt that they were able to give it the platform it deserves, because it's a terrific movie.
It is a wonderful film. I was there for the launch of it when they presented it at Lido, I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great
film.
Because I think its original premiere was at the Capitol, and Ray was great. He'd spent days, I think, sort of hanging things around the cinema foyer, and skeletons, and I think there was a skeleton riding a bomb or something in the foyer. He really pulled out all the stops. Great.
And of course, the other guy that's on the show with us is Jarrett Garn, who has done everything he can to get Houseboat Horror to a new audience.
Oh God, Houseboat Horror! Gee whiz, I got suckered into a panel on that, because that's funny. Houseboat Horror, for anyone that doesn't know, is a made for video, on video, literally the first video feature film made in this country, by the sadly departed and ever dynamic Ollie Martin, and that was one of the first films I worked on coming out of film school. And oh man, that film owes me because I edited that film on weekends for about 1.5 years, and wow. it was all cut on a VHS editing system, and it was a strange world, that one, but. It has been funny watching how it sort of entered the lexicon of sort of Australian cult films, because it is just so bad. Look, the good news is they knew it was bad when they were doing it. They were acutely aware of it.
That shit crazy. And for people that are listening or even watching, you also, of course, made Kenny and Brothers Nest. And I think Brothers Nest is the very type of film we need more of in this country.
Well, thank you. We loved it. That's the most fun I've had working on any production. Wasn't just because my big buffalo-headed brother was in it, but it was a lot of fun. We went into a lot of trouble. It was also just one of those classic, one location, small cast, the classic sort of, rules of making a low budget film, but it was a really good script. It was great fun. I actually didn't want to be in it, to be honest with Shane. I wanted someone like Angus, Sampson to play the brother, and I wanted to direct. But my brother very cunningly sort of said, "Look, I won't do it if you don't play opposite me." And I think he clearly had some demons he wanted to release, and he was wanting to aim them squarely at me and not indirectly through some other actor. So I'll do it.
I think the film is so much better off for you being in it, and it's you took it to places I was not expecting it to go. So and of course, Kenny is my all-time favorite Australian film. So.
Oh God, thank you. Again, another one of those fantastic moments that I wish we saw coming. We didn't. We thought we were making a glorified home movie, and our hope was that it would go out on DVD and probably be embraced by plumbers and their families. And if we were lucky, if I was lucky, filmmakers that understood that I was sort of screwing with the form. I was trying to create a bit of a hybrid between observational documentary making and drama. And that was the in-joke for me, and also very earnestly wanting to make a portrait on a riff on decency, and a portrait of a man who really doesn't exist in the real world. I mean, we do need validation in our lives, and he is seemingly a human being that doesn't.
Well, yeah, I think because that and The Big Steal are my two favourite Australian films, and I think both of them sort of have that endearing quality that is rarely captured on film these days.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, a lot of it is based on a lot of Kenny is sort of a hybrid of my uncles and the kind of world I knew growing up in the western suburbs of Melbourne. You know,
Mm.
I was often watching films about Australian sort of laconic characters, and they didn't feel like anyone I knew. They
Mm.
they were the mindset and the work of, you know, upper middle class comedians that were, you know, for the most part looking down their nose, and you know, we were laughing at them, not with them. And
Yeah.
I always said to Shane and my father, who's a great movie buff, if I ever get to make an Australian comedy about that world, I want to make it with all the love and affection that I have for my uncles. And you know, they weren't particularly well educated, but by God, you could not pull the wool over their eyes. They had street smarts,
Mm.
and they understood humanity in a way that was much, you know, that they had much more acumen to survive the world than any professor or any sort of, you know,
Yeah.
academic that I knew.
And I think up until that point, most working class characters on Australian film were knucklemen. You know, really sort of rough around
Yeah.
the edges. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But how's this from houseboat horror to Dreamscreen? Like there's a
There's a
there,
segue. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And maybe I'm being naive, but this feels like pioneering stuff to me. Can you describe what Dreamscreen is to people and how it works?
Yeah, well, Dreamscreen is it's sort of, you know, the technology's been getting a fair bit of press over the last year with the likes of Mandalorian, you know,
Mm.
and I say that with biting my tongue slightly, only because I have been playing with this technology for 10 years.
Right.
I first looked into this sort of thing back in 2009 when I made a series called Morty Coots with my brother, and we did a deal with Ubisoft where we were using gaming backgrounds to create, you know, worlds that we could place actors in, and it was all predicated on the fact that I was doing ads at the time, and my son was playing an Xbox game, and I was working on this commercial where we had a character shrunken down onto a tabletop, and I wanted the camera to move a little bit, and the those that were doing all the effects for me at the time said come back in about 3 days time, and I went, okay, no worries. And I went home, and there's my son moving around in a 3D space in real time with his thumb.
Mm.
And I remember saying to my son as I walked past him, God, what I wouldn't give to put an actor in one of those, you know,
Yeah.
And heard myself say it. Went, well, hang on, maybe I can, you know. And I was acutely aware that the image quality wasn't really up for the large screen or even a television, to be honest. So what I devised was the idea of epic storytelling on a small screen, being YouTube, right?
Mm.
So we contacted Ubisoft. They were into the idea, but we didn't have any of the technology that we have now, where we can track the camera in the background. I mean, tracking was around at that stage, but it wasn't available to us. Anyway, long story short, we did that. It sort of worked. Didn't really have much take up. People weren't really that sort of taken by the approach we used. And foolishly, you know, YouTube really wasn't the place for it because it was a very sort of Mel Brooks sort of
Mm.
sense of humor. And most of the people at that stage were 16-year-olds on YouTube wanting to look at, you know, people just like themselves in a bedroom setting commenting on the world. So it kind of fell on deaf ears a little bit. Cut to 2019, and I've moved up to where I am now, which is out in the country on about 6 acres, and I've turned a 5-car garage into a film studio, which isn't Dreamscreen. It's my own little film studio that I do tests and things out of.
Yeah.
And when I suddenly noticed that Unreal Engine was getting infinitely better at creating good quality, you know, images, I thought maybe now's the time to try this again. So I brought in the help of an LED company. We put a 6-meter screen in my studio, and my son and I hacked into a Vive and into Unreal Engine and created what was the first iteration of Dreamscreen. And I was blown away. It took us about 3 days to approximate something that you could actually work with.
Yeah.
And we sort of we marked out a grid on the ground, and then we created a false grid in Unreal, and then we tried to match the two together. And when I could get the camera on set to be in sync with the grid, get the two grids to overlap each other, I knew that we were close. And but I couldn't get anyone interested in this technology at the time. No one. And we couldn't find anyone in the world that was doing anything like it. Cut to about a year later, and I was in LA doing some meetings and heard about the AR war. And those guys need a plug because they were actually the ones that were pioneering this kind of technology long before The Mandalorian. Anyway, long story short, I put it to rest. I went back to making films, and along comes the COVID, and I'm at it's March last year, and I'm about to get on a plane to go to Bulgaria to start shooting a film. We had Guy Pearce attached, and COVID hits, and it sort of blows everything out of the water. And the question was asked, can we do the film here now in Melbourne? And I said no. It's set in New York. Bulgaria had a 4 blocks of a Harlem setting which we were going to use. I would need something like this Dreamscreen technology to make it work, and that got me thinking. Well, if we're going to be locked in our homes for the next 2 or 3 years, this is actually the right kind of technology to get up and running. And then lo and behold, it started to sort of sprout up everywhere. It wasn't because of me; it was just osmosis, and zeitgeist just took hold. And long story short, I put about 6 months into gearing up all of the tech for it. Got some investors involved, brought a number of very smart people in, created a couple of really great partnerships with some very key people like Method Studios that did all the effects on Game of Thrones and what have you. And before we knew it, we were running tests with a 17.5-meter screen that was 5 meters high and with a full LED roof and 2 4x4 meter floating walls at Batman Studios in Coburg, and road testing and really trying to break the system to see what it can do and what it can't do. So what is it? It's basically a new technology that is a new spin on the old technology of back projection, front projection. The only difference being that we can now track the actual camera, and that data gets fed into Unreal Engine, where there's a virtual camera in a virtual world, and the two are completely linked together and in sync. So everything your actual camera does, the virtual camera does in a false world. You then spit that false world image onto the screen that the actor is in front of, and lo and behold, you've got parallax. It looks like you're moving around, but that's not the end of it. The real joy of virtual production, particularly with LED screens, is that it's a 4/5 lighting solution. The camera's only ever looking at 1/5 of the screen. The other 4/5 are creating ambient light, which wraps around the character and really sells the idea that they're in that space.
Absolutely. So I reckon you've probably answered about 5 of my questions, all within that.
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. I guess, people that know your work up until this point probably wouldn't peg you for sort of a tech savvy kind of person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have. I mean, how far into this did you get before you were out of your depth and had to call a lot of other people in, or were you sort of on top of it the whole way?
Well, I've always had a love for the magic of filmmaking. It was 2001 that started it. I saw that when I was 9 years old. It wasn't when the film was released. It was re-released at the cinemas, and I saw it at the Track Cinema with Ray Bosley, who we were just talking about. And I was mesmerized by it and was fascinated in how it was made. And everything from Planet of the Apes to eventually Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, these kind of films, I became obsessed with how they made these films. And so Ray Bosley and we bought ourselves a Super 8 camera when I was about 9 or 10. And we spent most of our teens recreating a lot of the scenes out of those films. So, but we didn't have any of the tools. So we would make paper mache. I made a paper mache R2-D2. We made a Millennium Falcon. We blew them all up in our garage, and we'd get our parents to drive their cars into the garage and turn on the high beams. And that was our lighting,
Yeah.
So there was always a bit of a hands-on love of filmmaking. I've always loved the guerrilla style of filmmaking. And I love those solutions and I've always invested in these in the films I've done where, even in Brother's Nest, there are scenes in that where there are special effects that we did that if you had given them to a special effects supervisor, it would have cost you $8,000, and they would have gone to a lot of trouble, and they would have built all sorts of fancy ways of having this rig. But, in my world, it's like, no, that's a piece of cardboard with a hole in it. You photocopy a bit of wallpaper. It's a simple shot gaffered to a post. That's the way I've always thought. But the other thing that's been saddled with that is my love of wanting to streamline filmmaking to put more control into the hands of directors. You know, just that thing of the dream to the realization. I want to try and bring that time frame down from 10 years, because that's an awful long time between waking up with a dream and seeing and having an audience watch it. And people will often say to me, are you disappointed that, you know, that film never got made? And I go, well, I'm not disappointed for myself. I've seen it. It's just no one else has seen it. So it's a long-winded way of answering your question, but the answer to your question is there's always been a love affair of that stuff. So when I first started thinking about Dreamscreen, as I said, we'd already delved into it in certain sort of ad hoc ways, but I sort of did a very deep dive about 8 months ago and literally spent every day in lockdown researching as much as I possibly could about the technology. And then when I felt that I had enough understanding of what was needed, like a little bit like I know how a crane works. I know how a Steadicam works. I know, you know, what filters to use, how to best use a camera. You know, the advantages and disadvantages of certain lighting styles. But don't hand me a spanner and ask me to fix it. You know, ask me to pull the thing apart. I can't do that. So I certainly got to a point where I went, okay, now is the time to bring in the experts. And I just wanted to have enough of the language so that when I started talking to them about this crazy idea that I had, that they wouldn't just write me off as an idiot. And and thank God they didn't. And we were able to, you know, sort of corral a fantastic group of people that jumped on board. We had some great people working with us that had worked on Star Wars, a couple of Star Wars films, and, you know, done a lot of really amazing films. But they loved it because they're used to being part of this monster that is the sort of the Unreal Engine sort of background crews that, you know, when you go and watch those films and there's this blanket of names that come up, you know, and you go, oh my God, you know, they're used to being one of those kind of guys. But in our instance, they were a real hero. You know, they were on set with the crew. They were on set with the cast. They were the master and commander. We were looking behind the curtain and seeing the Wizard of Oz at play. And so we had some pretty smart guys sort of running the wall for us and helping us create some magic.
So what have you been producing lately with it primarily? Is like have you had a chance to make many projects, or is it sort of just in that infancy beforehand and you're ready to go?
Well, no, we are basically we're putting all of our energies into, you know, we really want to be the you know, the preeminent sort of facility here in Victoria, and as such we're building a studio that is you know, primarily set up just for that. So we're in the thick of dealing with you know, council permits and planning permits and commercial real estate agents. We've found a location that we really love, and we're just in the throes of doing the final deals on that. And so we had to pull down the rig that we had going, and we're now going to set up in this new location. And if all goes well, we'll be up and running within about 4 weeks, and that'll be a larger volume than the one we had if all goes well. So yeah, and but really the tests that we did in November were very thorough. We spent 2 weeks really putting it through a total battery of the good, bad, and the ugly to see what it could and couldn't do, and we were blown away by just how you really do feel like a little demigod when you're in this. You know, it's like sort of walking into Cape Canaveral. You know, it's just all these tables with computers and very smart people all staring up at this screen, waiting for something magical to happen. And it is a very large television. You know, it's a 17 meter by 5 meter TV, and it really is. It really is it's something to behold when you're in the studio. But more when it's working well. It really is incredible, even to the eye. You know, you've got to keep reminding yourself this isn't real. This is a window to another world, you know.
I would love to see that in action. I don't know if you know, there's a thing called the Digital 25, and that's a list of 25 leading visionaries and pioneers as determined by the Producers Guild of America and Variety magazine. I think directors like Brett Leonard and James Cameron are examples of some of those 25. Mate, if they revisit this list, surely you're a contender.
Well, I think there are others that have been doing it before me. I mean, there are some great volumes around the world. There's one in Munich that's really kicking ass, You know, the guys at ILM are doing a pretty amazing job. But you know, the good news is we have been noticed by Epic. They are very, very excited by what we're doing, and they have given us you know, they've given us access to their LA labs, and so we're part of the inner sanctum there, which is fantastic. So we're getting good support, and we're wrapping up the last of our R&D, and then, you know, if all goes well, we'll be up and running within a month. So
wow,
you know, yeah.
Well, if ever you do a sequel to Kenny, those crowd scenes will be much easier.
They will, yeah. It's actually it would be funny if the first thing we shot was actually a row of toilets. They would be very apt.
Yeah. Well, mate, this is exciting stuff. Good on you for sort of being on the front foot in Australia with it. People can visit dreamscreenaustralia.com or find you on the social medias, Facebook and whatnot, just to see how it works. The videos are incredible.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're trying to put up enough stuff to sort of give people a window into it. It is a new technology. It does kind of baffle people, and in a weird sort of way, that's a backhanded compliment, because the end results are very believable, and so people do struggle to work out where the magic begins and ends, and that's what's exciting about it. And I must say, with all of there are new iterations to Unreal Engine that are coming out this year that will be a whole other ball game. Very exciting stuff that where it's sort of all heading. And you know, that idea of realism is really going to come into its own, I think, in the next year. So it is a great time to get into this space, particularly with COVID and what have you. You know, it is very COVID friendly sort of technology, but it's just, you know, it's a great toy. You know, it just, you know, it's and you know, the one other thing, that there are a lot of things that I didn't expect to come out of it. You know, Ray Bosley came along, and I actually threw him in front of the lens on a couple of shots, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, you know, this is a terrific gift to writers. And I said, really? He said, look, you know, sky's the limit now. I mean, this gives us as writers a chance to do things when we're not going to be as hemmed in by the restrictions that producers very, you know, logically have to, you know, enforce on a writer when they're putting together a series or a feature film. This technology does really give you the ability to do the unthinkable.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, because, you know, a lot of people who listen to our show or watch these videos probably have no idea what it is if they're not sort of on your Facebook, and it's just a massive thing for our local industry. So, and I think, you know, you deserve all the accolades you get.
Oh, thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate it.